Every night, without exception, something extraordinary happens to you. It happens quietly. There is no flash of light, no sound, no memory waiting for you in the morning. Your body remains where it is, anchored to the planet by gravity and habit. Your heart keeps beating. Your lungs keep pulling in air. But the part of you that experiences reality loosens its grip on the waking world and enters a different kind of place altogether. A place that science has struggled to describe, philosophy has argued over for thousands of years, and modern physics has only recently begun to take seriously. This place is not a dream in the casual sense. It is not a fantasy or hallucination. It is not simply the brain replaying the day like an old recording. Night after night, your consciousness reorganizes itself into patterns that do not exist while you are awake. Time behaves differently there. Identity behaves differently there. Cause and effect blur. Information appears without effort. Memories connect in ways that seem impossible during the day. And most unsettling of all, this place appears to follow rules that resemble the deepest laws of the universe more closely than the rules of ordinary waking life. For most of human history, this nightly transition was explained with myth. Souls wandering, spirits traveling, God speaking in symbols. Modern science tried to reduce it to chemistry alone, dismissing the experience as neurological noise. But as our tools improved, and as neuroscience began to overlap with physics, something unexpected happened. The simple explanation stopped being enough. Sleep turned out to be one of the most complex, information-rich states the human brain can enter. Consciousness did not shut off at night. It changed form. Tonight, like every night before it, you will go somewhere. You will cross a boundary that cannot be seen from the outside. And whether you remember it or not, that place shapes who you are, how you think, and how you perceive reality itself. This is not mysticism. This is not fantasy. This is the quiet frontier where biology, physics, and consciousness meet. And it begins the moment you close your eyes. If you enjoy slow, deep explorations of the universe and the hidden science behind everyday experiences, subscribe to The Boring Universe, like this video, and leave a comment. Tell us which part of the country you are watching from. The moment sleep begins, the brain does not power down. It reorganizes. Electrical activity shifts from the rapid, jagged patterns of waking consciousness into slower, synchronized waves. Entire regions that dominate daytime awareness, especially those involved in planning, self-monitoring, and linear reasoning, reduce their activity. At the same time, deeper systems linked to memory, emotion, and pattern recognition become more active. This transition is not random. It is one of the most precisely regulated processes in human biology, shaped by millions of years of evolution. From the outside, sleep looks passive. From the inside, it is anything but. As you move through the stages of sleep, your brain enters states that have no direct equivalent in waking life. In these states, sensory input from the external world is dramatically reduced. The brain is no longer prioritizing information from the eyes, ears, or skin. Instead, it becomes a closed system interacting primarily with itself. This is the first clue that the place your soul goes every night is not a physical location in space, but a shift in how reality itself is constructed. Neuroscientists describe sleep using measurable stages. Light sleep, deep slow wave sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. Each stage has its own electrical signature, its own chemistry, and its own function. But these labels, useful as they are, do not fully capture what is happening. Because what defines this nightly journey is not the stages themselves, but the relationship between consciousness and information during those stages. During waking life, consciousness is constrained. It is tethered to sensory input, bound by time, and filtered by survival priorities. The brain constantly suppresses irrelevant signals to keep you functional. At night, those filters loosen. The brain allows information to flow in ways that would be chaotic during the day. Distant memories activate alongside recent ones. Emotional associations link to abstract ideas. Visual imagery forms without light. Narrative emerges without intention. This is where the language of space and place becomes useful, even if the destination is internal, because the rules change. The brain enters a regime where probability, not certainty, dominates experience, where meaning arises from patterns rather than linear cause, where identity is flexible. In this sense, sleep resembles not ordinary consciousness, but the edge conditions studied in modern physics. In quantum mechanics, systems behave differently depending on how they are observed. At the smallest scales, particles do not have definite positions or properties until measurement occurs. Instead, They exist as probability distributions described by wave functions. While the brain is not a quantum computer in any simple sense, the metaphor is striking. During sleep, conscious observation relaxes. The strict narrative of the self dissolves. Mental states exist in overlapping possibilities rather than fixed outcomes. This does not mean the soul literally enters a quantum realm in the physical sense, but it does mean that the structure of experience at night mirrors some of the most fundamental principles we know about reality. The waking mind insists on clarity, separation, and sequence. The sleeping mind tolerates ambiguity, integration, and simultaneity. And it does so because the brain, freed from external demands, is exploring the full space of its own internal model of the universe. One of the most important functions of this nightly state is memory consolidation. Experiences from the day are replayed, reorganized, and integrated into long-term storage. But this process is not a simple replay. The brain selectively strengthens some connections and weakens others. It extracts patterns. It builds abstractions. It updates your internal understanding of how the world works. In other words, while you sleep, the brain is actively revising reality as you know it. This revision process requires a different mode of consciousness. The self you experience during the day, with its constant commentary and sense of control, would interfere. So it recedes. What remains is a form of awareness that is less verbal, less rigid, and more associative. This is why dreams feel immersive but unstable. You are present but not anchored. You experience, but you do not analyze. You witness without judgment. Across cultures, this state has been described as the soul traveling. The language varies, but the intuition is consistent. Something essential leaves the ordinary world and enters a hidden one. Modern neuroscience reframes this in biological terms, but the underlying observation remains valid. There is a profound shift in how experience is generated. Importantly, this shift is not optional. Deprive the brain of sleep, and cognition deteriorates rapidly. Emotional regulation fails, perception distorts, hallucinations appear, the boundaries between waking and dreaming blur. This tells us something crucial. The place consciousness goes at night is not a luxury. It is a requirement. Without it, the waking world itself begins to collapse. The brain evolved this nightly departure because reality is too complex to process in real time alone. During the day, you react. At night, you integrate. During the day, you survive. At night, you understand. The sleeping mind performs simulations, tests scenarios, and explores counterfactuals. It asks what might happen if conditions were different, without needing to act on those possibilities. This ability to simulate alternative realities is one of the defining features of human intelligence. In this sense, the place your soul goes every night is a laboratory, a closed universe where the brain can safely explore possibilities without consequence. Dreams often exaggerate this function, but it operates even in dreamless sleep. Neural networks reorganize. Synaptic strengths change. Entire patterns of thought are reweighted. You wake up slightly different than you were before. Physics offers an unexpected parallel. In cosmology, the early universe underwent a period of rapid expansion and reorganization. Tiny fluctuations were amplified into large-scale structures. Galaxies formed not from uniformity, but from subtle differences that grew over time. Similarly, during sleep, small changes in neural activity can reshape entire cognitive landscapes. What seems insignificant during the day becomes transformative at night. This analogy is not poetic coincidence. Both systems follow the same underlying principles of complex adaptive behavior. When constraints loosen and energy flows freely, systems explore their possible states. Some configurations stabilize, others fade. The result is increased order, not chaos. Sleep looks chaotic from the inside, but its outcome is coherence. There is also the question of consciousness itself. During deep sleep, conscious awareness as we normally define it appears to vanish, and yet the brain remains active. This raises one of the most profound questions in science. Is consciousness a thing that turns on and off, or is it a spectrum of states? Evidence increasingly supports the latter. Even in the absence of narrative self-awareness, there is ongoing information integration. Something is still there. This has led some researchers to propose that consciousness is not tied to waking thought, but to the capacity of a system to integrate information. By that definition, the sleeping brain is deeply conscious, just not self-reflective. The soul, if the word is to mean anything scientifically useful, may refer to this underlying continuity of experience across changing states. Every night, you enter a form of awareness that predates language, identity, and culture. It is closer to raw experience than waking thought. It is shaped by evolution, tuned by biology, and constrained by physics. It does not care about your plans or your worries. It operates according to deeper rules. This is why sleep has always been associated with revelation. Not because it reveals supernatural truths, but because it reveals truths that are inaccessible to linear thinking. Patterns emerge that cannot be forced. Solutions appear without effort. Insights arrive without explanation. The brain, released from conscious control, finds its own equilibrium. When you wake up, the transition reverses. Sensory input floods back in. The narrative self reasserts itself. The memory of the nightly journey fades, not because it was meaningless, but because it was too different to translate easily into words. What remains are its effects. A changed mood, a new perspective, a subtle shift in understanding. The place your soul goes every night is not somewhere you can point to on a map. It is a state defined by rules rather than coordinates. A realm where time stretches, identity dissolves, and information reorganizes itself according to principles older than humanity. You enter it every night because you must. Because reality, as complex as it is, requires periods of withdrawal as much as engagement. That this nightly place is not merely a passive internal state, but an active process that shapes reality as you experience it. Sleep is not just restoration, it is recalibration. And to understand why, we need to examine how the brain constructs reality in the first place. What you experience during the day feels immediate and objective, but neuroscience tells a different story. The brain does not directly perceive the world. It builds a model of the world. Light hits the retina, vibrations strike the inner ear, pressure activates receptors in the skin, and all of this fragmented data is translated into electrical signals. The brain then predicts what is most likely happening outside your body and presents that prediction to you as reality. Conscious experience is not the world itself, but the brain's best guess. This predictive process is continuous and extraordinarily energy-intensive. At every moment, the brain compares incoming sensory data with internal expectations shaped by past experience. When predictions are accurate, perception feels stable. When they fail, surprise and confusion arise. This mechanism allows you to navigate an uncertain world efficiently, but it comes at a cost. Errors accumulate. Assumptions harden. Models drift away from reality. Sleep exists in part to correct this drift. At night, when sensory input is reduced to near zero, the brain turns inward. The predictive machinery does not shut down. Instead, it runs offline. Internal models are tested against stored memories rather than external stimuli. Conflicts are resolved. Inconsistencies are smoothed out. This process resembles what engineers call optimization. The system explores variations until it finds configurations that minimize error. This is where dreams enter the picture. Dreams are not random images stitched together without meaning. They are simulations generated by the brain to test hypotheses about the world and about you. Emotional scenarios are replayed not to torment you but to recalibrate responses. Social interactions are rehearsed. Threats are exaggerated so that reactions can be refined. Even abstract dreams, those that seem nonsensical on the surface, often reflect deep structural work being done beneath conscious awareness. From this perspective, the place your soul goes every night is not separate from reality. It is where reality is updated. The waking world you experience tomorrow will be shaped by the adjustments made while you slept. This explains why sleep deprivation is so devastating. Without time in this internal space, the brain's model of reality degrades. Hallucinations emerge because predictions no longer align with sensory input. Emotional volatility increases because regulatory systems are no longer calibrated. There is a deeper implication here. If reality is a model constructed by the brain and sleep modifies that model, then consciousness at night is participating in the ongoing creation of your experienced universe. Not in a mystical sense, but in a literal one. The world you perceive is filtered through neural structures that are reshaped every night. Physics again provides an unexpected parallel. In thermodynamics, systems far from equilibrium require periods of reorganization to maintain stability. Living organisms are prime examples. They constantly export entropy to remain ordered. Sleep is one of the primary ways the brain does this. Neural activity during the day creates disorder at the synaptic level. Sleep restores balance by selectively pruning and strengthening connections. This pruning is not arbitrary. Synapses that are rarely used weaken. Frequently used ones stabilize. This ensures that important information is retained while noise is discarded. But deciding what counts as important is not trivial. It depends on goals, emotions, and future relevance. Sleep integrates these factors in ways conscious thought cannot easily replicate. Importantly, this process is deeply personal. Two people can experience the same day and sleep in the same room, yet their nightly journeys will be profoundly different. The place consciousness enters is shaped by individual history, biology, and internal priorities. This reinforces the idea that this is not a shared external realm, but a private universe governed by universal principles. However, the privacy of this place does not make it isolated. Human brains evolved in social environments. Much of what is processed during sleep involves other people. Social bonds, conflicts, and hierarchies are replayed and refined. This is one reason dreams often feature familiar faces. The brain is optimizing not just survival but belonging. There is also the question of time. In dreams, time stretches and compresses unpredictably. Entire narratives unfold in seconds. This is not an illusion. It reflects a genuine change in how temporal information is processed. During sleep, the brain is no longer constrained by external clocks. It operates according to internal rhythms. This allows it to explore long-term consequences quickly, simulating futures without waiting for them to occur. In physics, time is not absolute. Relativity shows that time depends on the observer's frame of reference. While the brain is not warping space-time, the analogy is informative. Consciousness has its own frame of reference, and during sleep, that frame shifts. The subjective experience of time becomes elastic because it is no longer anchored to sensory change. This elasticity serves a function. It allows the brain to evaluate extended sequences of cause and effect efficiently. A single emotional issue can be examined from multiple angles in one night. Multiple possible outcomes can be tested without risk. This capacity for accelerated simulation may be one of the most important evolutionary advantages of sleep. Another striking feature of the nightly state is the reduced sense of self. The narrative voice that dominates waking consciousness often disappears. You do not question the logic of events. You do not reflect on your identity. You simply experience. Neuroscience links this to reduced activity in the brain's default mode network, a system associated with self-referential thought. When this network quiets, the boundary between self and experience softens. This has profound implications. The sense of a fixed, continuous self is not constant. It is a construct maintained by specific neural activity. At night, that activity diminishes, revealing a more fluid form of consciousness. This does not mean the self ceases to exist, but that it is no longer the central organizing principle. Many philosophical traditions have pointed to this fluidity as evidence that the self is not fundamental. Modern science does not need to adopt metaphysical conclusions to recognize the phenomenon. The brain supports multiple modes of identity, and the sleeping mode prioritizes integration over narration. The place your soul goes every night is therefore not defined by who you think you are. It is defined by what your brain needs to become. It is future-oriented rather than present-focused. It is concerned with adaptation, not explanation. This also explains why some insights feel as though they come from nowhere upon waking. The brain has been working on problems without conscious supervision. When the waking self returns, it inherits the results without access to the process. This can feel mysterious, even external, but it is simply the consequence of parallel processing beyond awareness. There is ongoing debate about whether consciousness is continuous across sleep or whether it fragments into disconnected episodes. Evidence suggests continuity at a deep level. Even when dreams are not remembered, neural activity shows structured patterns. The absence of memory does not imply absence of experience. It implies a lack of encoding into the narrative memory systems used by waking consciousness. This distinction matters. Memory is not experience, it is a record. The place your soul goes every night may be rich with experience that never reaches the surface. Its purpose is not to be remembered. Its purpose is to prepare. As research advances, scientists are beginning to map this internal landscape with increasing precision. Brain imaging reveals coordinated activity across distant regions during sleep. Neurochemistry shifts dramatically, creating conditions that are impossible during wakefulness. The brain temporarily changes the rules under which it operates. These rule changes are not arbitrary. They reflect a fundamental principle seen throughout nature. Systems require periods of exploration to avoid becoming trapped in suboptimal states. Sleep provides this exploration by loosening constraints. Dreams are the visible traces of that freedom. When you wake, the constraints return. Focus sharpens, identity solidifies. Time regains its familiar rhythm. But the effects of the night remain embedded in the structure of your mind. You carry them forward often without knowing it. The place your soul goes every night is not an escape from reality. It is where reality is repaired, refined, and reimagined. It is a necessary counterbalance to the demands of conscious life. Without it, perception fractures and meaning erodes. When viewed from far enough away, the nightly journey of human consciousness stops looking unique and starts looking familiar. The same principles that govern what happens in your mind while you sleep also govern stars, cells, ecosystems, and entire galaxies. Complex systems cannot remain stable by constant activity alone. They require cycles of engagement and withdrawal, order and exploration, structure and release. Sleep is not an exception to the universe's rules. It is an expression of them. Across nature, periods of apparent inactivity are often where the most important restructuring occurs. Stars spend vast stretches of time in relative stability, quietly balancing opposing forces. Ecosystems cycle through seasons of growth and dormancy. Even the universe itself appears to evolve through phases, expanding, cooling, reorganizing. In every case, complexity is maintained not by constant output, but by rhythmic transformation. The human brain follows the same pattern. The place your soul goes every night is the brain's version of this universal reset. It is where excess noise is reduced, where fragile structures are reinforced, and where future possibilities are explored without immediate consequence. It is not mystical, but it is profound. It is not outside the laws of physics, but deeply aligned with them. This perspective reframes sleep from something we endure to something we participate in. Each night, consciousness enters a mode that prioritizes coherence over control. The waking world demands precision, action, and certainty. The night allows ambiguity, imagination, and recalibration. Both are necessary, neither is sufficient alone. What feels like disappearance is actually continuity at a deeper level. The narrative self steps aside so that the underlying system can do its work. In the morning, you return not because the journey ended, but because it succeeded. The world feels stable again because your internal model has been repaired. The place your soul goes every night has no coordinates, no borders, and no name that fully captures it. It is a state where the mind aligns itself with the deeper rhythms of reality. You do not visit it to escape the universe. You enter it to remain compatible with it. And tonight, as always, you will go there again.